Yeah. Hey guys, my name is Ismail. So today what we're going to be doing is looking at some shaders. Specifically, we're going to be trying to create a water shader. For Blender eevee. Let me make sure everything is fine here. Let me check out my stream. Okay, so what we're going to do is make water, not simulated, just a water shader in Blender, and also examine the different nodes for Blender. So let's go to shading mode. If there is any issues, you can let me know and see what I can do. So let's delete this and add a plane. This will be a nice area to begin with, and I think we can add another object here, maybe a UV sphere. Then let's begin with the materials. So I'll just create a new material here. Give me a moment. So let's turn on ambient occlusion and also screen space reflections, and so we are going to create procedure textures using nodes, and we can begin by examining the different the texture we want to do. So let me first add a reference image. Let me see when 3D models, library, textures. So I have this image here, and if you watched some of my previous tutorials, you will see that this is the texture I usually use when I'm creating quick water effect. Yeah, I want to make it a procedure texture so that I don't have to worry about the resolution of the image. So let's create a texture that looks like that, and that will be our water texture. So I will add in there are a few textures we can use here. So let's examine how they look and see what we can get, if we can get anything closer to this. So Shift A, let me switch on my keys here so that you can see what I'm doing. Shift A, texture. We have, let me see, we have magic. So if you have the node wrangler add-on enabled, you can just hit Control. You can have Control and then Shift and then click on the image on the node to preview that image directly. So this is how this one looks. You can see the pattern somehow matches this, but it's not exact. So what we will do, we are going to mix this with a few other textures and see if we can get anything close to this. So let's also look at mass grave. Control Shift and then click. This looks like this. I think we can also mix it with this to get a pattern that looks like this. So we also have it, we'll add it there. Let's look at we'll use a noise texture as well for extra details, and let's see what else do we have. Voronoi, I think, is also something we can use. You can see this is even closer to this than any other texture. We can also use the wave texture. So we're going to mix all of these to get something close to this, and to preview any of these textures, we can just drag this directly into the displacement modifier, so we can see some of the detail. Just give it a moment for the shader to compile. So this is how the shader looks right now. So if I add in some distortion, you can see, I think that's already good, but I would need to add in more detail by using these other nodes. So you can also scale this down if you want, but if you are looking from the far, you can start to see some kind of repetition in this. It's not very obvious, but it is there. So that's why we're going to mix it with other nodes here to kind of break that repetition, give it some kind of variations around somewhere there. So because some areas look almost the same, if you're very careful, you can see the repetition in there, but it's not too obvious. Mostly on these, let me see, was it Fractal? Voronoi? Yes, just to give it more variation, we're going to be mixing the different textures and see how that goes. So another thing I like to do before I start mixing the textures is first adding the reflections and everything else to see how this looks. So if we first disable this displacement and turn up reduce the roughness, so we have sharp reflections like this. If you have any, let me see if I can find water reference images so that you can see how water looks like, and so that we can create the shader looking at the water itself. Let's see, I think this is good, and maybe this one here. And see, the water is not the same color. First, forget about the ground beneath the water. Just the water itself. You can see some areas a bit greenish and some areas a bit blue, and that's what we want to achieve. So you can see near here it's kind of greenish and then it becomes bluer like that. So we can use the specular to, let me see, if I give this, let me first increase the roughness a bit, and maybe let me go to this. So if I change the specular to maybe a greenish color, make sure this is, and give our base color, sorry, this is the surface color. I need the specular tint. So because there is no direct color input here, you can just add a color mix RGB here and connect that to the specular tint, and we can use a blue. Let me see if this is going to give us any effect. This is supposed to be one of the two. Let me first see what's going on. So it seems that the specular doesn't work like that, but we can use this base color, but use the color mix RGB, and one color should be a bit blue and another one greenish like that. And the way we can mix them is by using the layer weight node. So you can just bring the Fresnel or facing as your factor. Let's give it a moment, and you can see at some angles you will see that at some angles it looks greenish, more greenish than blue, and at some angles let's also use the material here so that you can see that clearly. You can see around here, you see it's blue, and around here it's a bit greenish. That's the effect we're going for. So if you reduce the roughness, that effect becomes even more pronounced. So now if we add our distortion, our displacement, You can see it's not too much, but so because there is not a lot to reflect here, so we need to go to materials, or we can add our own background image for the lighting. So I'll go to the world setting, use nodes, and then add an environment texture, and find one. By the way, these images, background, these HDR images that I'm using, you can find them at HDRI Heaven, and you can use them as well. So there is one that I usually like. It has good contrast and good lighting, so I think this one here. So this is what we have so far, and but you see that color is coming out too much. So what we can do is turn on transmission. This will give it some kind of refraction and make it a bit like glass or like water, because now light rays can go through, but I think this there is too much difference between these colors. So maybe let's give it a more bluish color like that. And if you want, you can go under the material settings and change the blending mode to additive, and you will have that kind of water, but it's not very well detailed, so we are going to mix it with these other nodes that we have here. So we have that, so we're going to mix them until we get something close to this, that is the texture of water, and we'll be using that here. So the reason I haven't mixed them yet is that I want to first give this some bit of animation, so that it's like a water stream that is going from this side to this side, flowing downwards. But because of this blending mode, we don't really see the water clearly, so I'm going to change it back to opaque for now, and maybe we can look at that a bit later. So before we worry about the color or the look of the text of the water, we can first play with the texture itself, so that we get the displacement right before we do anything else. So what I'm going to do is first switch off this and maybe just preview the texture. So this is what we have. You can see it's very low detailed. So we can to blend this texture with say this texture here, we can add a color mix node, and then bring this with this, and to preview this node, just hold on Ctrl Shift and then click on that node. Yeah, so we are now previewing this, but right now you can see that we are mixing the values using their opacity. So if we give this a factor of 1, the bottom texture will come through, and if we give this a factor of 0, the top texture will come through. So to mix them, we can just use the multiply color and give this a factor of 1, so that the white areas, in areas where it is white, this texture will come through, and areas that are black, this texture can come through. If you just want the other way around, you can change this to screen, so that is the inverse of what we are doing here, something like that. And you can blend this a bit by reducing the factor like that, so that we still have some values within that area. But if we preview this here, you can see the texture is a bit too big. What we can do is increase the scale of this, and that is what we have. So what I wanted is to animate this texture so that is kind of flowing at a direction, and there are a few ways you can do that. The first way, let's first just concentrate on one texture. Let me disconnect this, bring it up here. Just look at this. The first way is to do it is by using mapping, UV mapping. So you can hold down Ctrl Shift T. I think it's Ctrl T to bring up the mapping, make sure you have the node wrangler add-on turned on, otherwise this won't work. So, and we can try and play around with these mapping coordinates. So because we can animate them, it means that we can also make this kind of move in any direction we want. So let's see what we would work best. Let's first remove this distortion, just so we're only looking at lines. That way it's easier to tell where the liquid would be flowing. So you can also change the mapping here, because right now the scale of the texture is linked to the scale of the object. So if we scale right now, you can see the texture also scales. And if we add a smaller object like this, maybe let's add this Zozan and give it the same material, you can see those ripples will be dependent on the scale of the hello DD toys, how are you? Those ripples will depend on the scale of the object. I usually don't want to do that, because then you will have to figure out how, say maybe if you want to make this stream longer, so if you do it in edit mode, it won't affect anything, but if you scale it in out of object mode, you can see you will also be scaling the texture. So what I usually do is change these to object, mode, and what this does, shouldn't be doing that. Let me see texture. It should not be dependent on the object scale, to my knowledge, but for some reason it is. Yes, actually it should, but yes. So if you extrude and do what, it will just create more ripples instead of scaling the ripples you already have. So let's see how we can animate this. So that would be in this direction. I don't know if you can see the ripples moving in the stream, but they should be. So let me see if we add an empty here, because I'm trying to find an easier way to animate these. So if we select that, you should be able to control the empty, but it's not controlling it. So let's first work on the texture and then come back to the animation part. So let's give this the distortion, so about a distortion of 10. Let's see, maybe more, not detail, but a distortion of, let's see, 20. And now let's mix this with this other texture, which is the mass grave texture. So this is what we would have, and you can control the factor to preview how much of the texture you want to come through. And we can again mix these two with a different texture. So Shift A, color, mix RGB, sorry, mix RGB, and bring this color, connect it maybe at the bottom, and this is, we want to mix it with this. We can reduce the scale down a bit, connect the color, and so the factor is set to mix, So the blending mode is set to mix, so we can just control this, how much of this texture comes through by this slider, or we can change the blending mode to something like multiply. So that we have some of that detail blending with the textures from here. Now let's preview this here and see how this looks. So this is how the water looks, but the displacement is too much, so we can add Shift A, convert math node, and this will let us control the displacement, the amount of displacement, because there is no direct way to control the value here in the displacement. So we just change this operation to multiply, and we can use this value now to change the displacement, the amount of displacement. So if we set this to 0, you can see there is no displacement at all. And if you increase this, you can see how much you're increasing. So 0.1 or 0.05, and you can see we have that. Maybe we also, I think we need more detail in some areas here, so we can use the noise texture, this here, reduce the scale down, but right now it's in color. It has a lot of it's colored, so we need to convert it to black and white using the convert color ramp node. And we can also control the contrast like so. And so right now what we have is this that is controlling this displacement that you see in the final image, but you see there is no detail in some areas, so we can again add a color, mix RGB, and mix this here with this. So just need to connect that with this. Let's give it a moment. So for this, we're just going to control this with the factor, and the blending mode we are going to maintain the mix blending mode, because we want that detail, that small detail, to be everywhere. So I guess we also need to increase the scale even further. Maybe let's first see how this looks in the final things. So we need now to use this as our displacement. Just give it a moment. I need to be saving this, all this water. So what I'm going to do is I will save this shader. I'm going to do a few more shaders and then save them in my Patreon account. So if you want to use them, you can find them there. So this is what we have right now. And at 1, you can see this is how the water looks. Some areas are not as detailed, and okay, I think this should not be in this value. This value should be just a digital value, not fed from a node. So let's see. Give it a moment. Let's see. 0.1. Okay, let me see what's going on here. So this is like this, So this is just the noise, and you can see it looks good just like that, but we need to add in more details, so we can mix it with some of the text. I don't know why this is looking like this, so let's preview this and see. Maybe you can preview. Yes, so you can see if I want more repos, I'll increase this here, and then let's see how. I think we have lost quite a lot of repos here, so let's try changing the blending mode to multiply and see. We have that. Let's change it to screen. Interesting. So previously this is how the water looked. Let me. And this is slowing down quite a lot. I don't need this to have a value at the bottom. Let me see 0.5. I think this is too much, maybe 0.2. And then we can come in and see, because I want to get rid of these lines that are coming. I think they're being created by this Voronoi texture, so we can remove that and maybe use a noise, this noise here, for that detail, because yeah, the water looked like this before. So if we bring in this texture down here, so we have some bit of detail in there, so we can mix it. First disconnect this. So sometimes if you see that your work area is slow when you're connecting these nodes, what you can do is first switch to the work to this shader here, which doesn't render the materials, and they can connect the nodes. And it's kind of making the calculations here, but it shouldn't. So we need this to be disconnected and disconnected. Now if we go back to materials, so we need to play around with this. Somehow I'm losing a lot of detail here. I'm losing the other repos. I'm not sure where I'm losing them, but let's see. So at 0 we have this texture, and then at 1 we have these repos, and I think we also need to remove some of that detail there. So let's do 0.1 so that we have that, and then mix, and then so to bring in this detail, we can reduce this to something like that. can see what we have. So that's how you do water. And if you want it to be transparent, so because if we have an object right now under this water, you don't really see that object. So to make it that you can see that object, you just go under the material settings and then change the blending mode to additive. This will render the texture with transparency, so that any objects that is underneath can be visible, but then you will also lose some of the color values in the water. That's the problem, but yeah, that's how you make a water shader. It's just playing around, playing around with these nodes, texture nodes, and mixing them together. But let's first bring this back to opaque, and we can mix this color so that we have two colors, like I showed you in the reference images. Some of these areas are at some angles, or at some angles the water is a different color, and you can see here in some like far distances have this bluish color, and near distances you see this greenish color. And I think if we used the Fresnel input, we can control that color. So if we first switch off this transparency, so by changing the transmission to 0, that will remove any transparency. Let's give it a moment. So that effect that you see on this lake, we can achieve that by using the layer weight, because if we preview these nodes, and maybe add a convert color ramp between here to control the contrast. And see, we can achieve the same effect using that. So at some angles you see a different color in the far, and then closer here it will be a different color. And see, and that can be, we can either use the Fresnel or facing, because it produces the same effect. So if we change this to this, it is the same effect, but just it differs in how much of values you see. So we can just use this input here as the factor, and if we preview this node, you can see the effect, but these colors are too similar. So if we say it's supposed to be around there, maybe this should be a bit bluish, and connect this as our color. Then we just need to play around with these colors a bit. Also turn back the transmission. And can play around with these colors. So this is, and so if we scale this up, you can see what I'm talking about. it also gives you that kind of a depth effect, like this water is a bit has some depth to it. So yeah, so that's how you make a water shader. So I'll have this project up on my Patreon account. If you want to get it, you can use it. And and the way you would use it is that so I'm going to be saving the texture as, sorry, the project as this ball here. That is the only file you'll find in the project. Maybe I'm going to create a few more shaders, so there will be like 3 or 4, and there will just be balls like this, and with the texture. So I'll call this water texture. And let's say you will have a project. Let me create a simple swimming pool. Maybe we'll have a project. Let me go to shading. You would have your project, let's say like this. Maybe this is your swimming pool, and let's give it a simple texture. So maybe it has so I'm going to change this to object, so that there is no need to UV unwrap, and change this from flat to box. And you can increase this maybe to 5, no, 0.5, 0.5. And we would also maybe need, let's give this a light. Let's make this turn this into a sun, and turn on lights and ambient occlusion, and then screen space reflections. So you would have maybe a project like this. I'm seeing this, so we can turn on contact shadows here for this, so that we eliminate light going through the object. So contact shadows, and I think you can play with the exponential or the distance here to remove that. So maybe this is your project. You would just go, and you have downloaded this shader, you just copy that, Ctrl+C, and then paste. That would be the water you want to use. And then assign it the same texture, so you can see it would be very easy to use. Now you can delete the texture you have. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do, and you can then come in and edit the material a bit. Maybe reduce this like that. Yeah, so that's what we're going to do. And if you want to download this shader, I'm going to upload it to my Patreon account, and you can get it there. Yeah, thank you, and see you.